Good afternoon, everyone. We are just attending to a mic issue. There we go. And we are live. Thank you so much to our audience for being here physically. For anyone who's watching online, welcome as well. Very invigorating session. I always look forward to the sessions where we look to the future, and nothing looks to the future more securely than education and jobs, and that's what we're talking about today. I'm Anli Hatting. I have the privilege of facilitating this session. Minister John Steenhuisen needs no introduction. On Minister's left-hand side, Dr. Tobias Dooyer, CEO of Grain SA. In the centre, we have Dr. Sean Jones. And just remind me, AgriSeta.
Artisan Training Institute.
Sorry, I have the abbreviation here with me. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Jones.
Thank you.
We also have with us Mr. Fanny Petler from the AgriSeta. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. And Dr. I want to get a pronunciation correct because I practiced beforehand. Dr. Mankoli Moitse from Kagiso Trust. Thank you all so much.
Well done.
Thank you for being here today. So, South Africa's agriculture is evolving incredibly quickly as technology, mechanization, and digital systems change the way how farms and agribusinesses operate. That transformation obviously creates enormous opportunity, but only if we have the technical and artisan skills needed to ensure that people can participate meaningfully. Agriculture holds immense potential for job creation which unlocks economic participation, dignity for people in communities. And today's conversation explores how industry, government, training institutions can all work together to build a workforce that's not only skilled, but employable, adaptable, and future ready. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. So last year at NAMPU, we had a similar session where we launched NAMPU Tech. I want to start off by asking you, Tobias, where we are since then, in the past year. What developments have you seen? And why is it important for Grain SA to move beyond research and advocacy into workforce and skills development through NAMPU Tech?
Well, it's a little bit of a dream come true, and the dream is still evolving as we are proceeding. Like we mentioned last year, this dream started after a lot of farmers asked us, but two things. We've got a big crisis. Mechanics or technicians are incredibly expensive. They're not available. And what do we do with our kids? How do we train them up? And we brought that together and said, well, how do we solve this problem? And since then, we've been engaging with a number of partners, and this is what this conversation is all about. The partners are evolving in terms of how we're going to get this done. I think each one of the partners will indicate how they are, the role that they play in this. But fundamentally, what we've got is a huge opportunity. The key thing to artisan training is that work placement, that experience that they need to gain to make sure that they are certified at the end of the day. So we have lovely agribusinesses, and they have these placements where they can do learnerships. And we've got I've nearly promoted you, Uncle Fanny. From AgriSeta, doing lots of learnership and apprenticeships. And you can see how this thing is going in the direction where we can physically put people in places. The wonderful thing about specifically technical training is there's a huge demand. It nearly feels like scary to say to somebody, you're nearly guaranteed a job within a month or two after qualifying. And it's a huge need in the agricultural sector. Why are we doing this? I think there's a big thing in evolving. It's actually a worldwide trend that civil society organizations must do it for themselves. We shape our own future. And usually we have long conversations about chemicals and DNA and precision breeding and those kind of things. But precision farming or precision machinery is a huge element of modern day farming. We have these huge big robots out there. They're evolving into robots, and we need people that can actually service, operate, and build these wonderful new machines that we're going to see evolving into the future and running around on farms. So that's the fun thing, and it's a vision that we're very excited about.
So vision is one thing, but every vision needs bold steps, commitment, and support from the right places. And that's where the government comes in. In terms of what has happened over the last year, Minister Steenhuisen, in terms of how government is supporting not just Nampo-Tech, but industry-led agricultural skills development.
Yeah, so one of the key interventions that we have been driving is signing memorandums of understanding for technical cooperation with trading partner countries. I think when Grain SA and Dr. Dwyer launched this particular program, what they're looking for is the agricultural skills of the future. We understand there's a need now, but where is agriculture going? Where is it evolving? And what do those skills look like that we need to have going forward? And that's why it's very good to look at countries that are ahead of us on that particular journey, to understand what those skills are that are required, and then to obviously develop the technical support that's required. So we've signed a number of memorandums of understanding on a tech basis and agri-tech basis with Italy, and we'll be having a binational commission with them in 2 weeks' time, where agri-tech and the like is going to be very, very on the front foot of the agenda, with Japan, with China, who take a number of our students as well into Chinese universities to teach them the tech, but also the evolving nexus that you're starting to see between tech, science, movement, and the like that's taking place. One looks at just even drones, for instance. Drones in the last year have come a huge way, but those drones are going to need drone operators and licensed and trained operators. We need to find the best places in the world where those are, and to be able to bring those skills to bear in the ecosystem that agri-tech is creating, and to then harmonize those agreements so that they actually find something solid to interact with here on the South African side, rather than just remaining agreements on paper. For far too many years, we've seen these sorts of agreements signed, but there's no actual take-up or initiative there. What the Agri-Tech initiative will do is give us a plug-in point where we can say, right, the University of Shanghai, Japan, etc., plug in here, because this is an area where that has become the nexus for this type of skills development going forward. And that way, we can future-proof our agricultural sector in South Africa so that we do have those skills. I know I'm taking a bit longer than I should, but I just want to say it is one of South Africa's stumbling points, is the lack of skills in the country, which is why the CETAs were originally set up. Because even if we were to suddenly strike oil in the middle of the Karoo and our economy started growing at 8 or 9%, do we have the skills to drive that growth? Every other time we've had a major boost, even during the World Cup where we had to build stadiums, a lot of those skills had to be imported to meet the deadlines. And I think the evolving skills development is going to be fundamental to us future-proofing agriculture from the big changes that are coming.
And we're seeing a lot of increasing interest from young people in the agricultural sector. It's enjoying a lot of attention at the moment. The time to strike is now, to get them involved and to build a pipeline that's practical, and that pipeline leading to actual employment, I think is one of the key areas as well. I want to come to you next, Mr. Petla. How do you see sector skills systems evolving to stay relevant in this rapidly digitizing agricultural environment?
Well, thank you very much, and thanks, Doc, for promoting me to doctor.
Well deserved.
Thanks, good afternoon, Minister.
If anyone needs a degree here, I think it's me.
Thanks for sharing the platform with the Minister. It's an honor for me, Doc, for inviting AgriSETA. I think a lot has been said around what drives the skill needs, and technology is one of those. You cannot walk into this future and then you cannot respond to technology requirements and all that. I think from the SETA perspective, we are quite aware that the methodology of getting productivity nowadays is to apply a new method of farming and responsive to technology. But I think the gap that has been in the space is that while we producing number of learners, we are supporting number of learners, but practicality and application is missing. I think we need to join the synergies, we need to pull things together. I learned from what was said in the previous session, where we are now looking at the development of emerging farmers or subsistence farmers up to commercial. But if we don't look at the application level of technology, we will keep on producing learners. And then the learners, the seekers have been there, and many learners have been produced through skills development. But where are they? We are not able to really account to where are those learners, how are they thriving in terms of making life better for themselves or participating in mainstream or technology or economy and so forth. So I think this platform for me is very critical, and thanks for Grain SA to bring this platform, and I wish it could be cascaded around so that people can see how best we need to build synergies around the value chain and ecosystem of learning. But I think all what is now of note is how do we build technology? It's not cheap, we know, and how do we fund it? How do we fund development? How do we get all the role players to come to one table and fund the development, because we will find ourselves behind if we are not pulling strings together in terms of technology. But where do we start? I think we should start by identifying those key role players, catalysts in technology as a sector itself. Starting from the platform like this, I think is not bad, to start identifying each other to work together and then look at the technology drivers, look who can lead us in terms of, studying the technology. We can start the more small way. I don't think it's something that we can just boom because of the constraints that are involved monetary-wise into this space. But I think we've got institutions of learning. And then, for instance, we've got agricultural colleges in our space, 11 agricultural colleges. But where are they? What is the status? Where are they in terms of the ability to respond to technology that we want? And then we've got private institutions that we are seeing every day. Where are they in terms of capacity to help us impart this new method of learning to our communities and so on? So this is those modalities that we need to look at and try to enhance in terms of resources, synergies, the industry, private sector, public sector to come in one roof and work together on the resource side.
And luckily, that's one thing that our challenges over the past 5 years has necessitated, this working together, private sector, government, organized agriculture, agribusinesses, all committing to the same goals. And I think that's probably set us up really well for this pathway or the journey with Nampo-Tech. Dr. Jones, the practical component of what Mr. Petla was saying in the initial part of his response, that plays in very effectively, because I want to ask you about dual training models. Why are they so much more effective than traditional classroom-only models? And what is the vision with Nampo-Tech to realize that practical and classroom components working together?
I'd like to just start off by saying that one of our strengths as a country is that we have qualifications and a framework for skills development. When we work in most parts of Africa, they don't recognize a boilermaker, a fitter, or they don't even have those categories of employment. So working with industry in Africa is extremely difficult as a result. So we're very fortunate to have a very sophisticated framework for skills development. So the opportunity for us is to capitalize on that. Where I think we've struggled is that industry in South Africa was traditionally spoiled. Many years ago, as you know, all the parastatals used to train artisans, the army used to train. They used to push out about 3,000 apprentices each per annum, Eskom, all of those institutions. So South African industry got spoiled. They used to sit back and just handpick artisans at will. the minute the parastatal's got a profit motive, obviously they shut down training capacity, and we had an aging artisan workforce. A lot of those people work up in Africa. When I go up there, you see South Africans all over Africa earning US dollars. So some of our best skills are north of the Limpopo. So that's a challenge. And what we have to do as a country is get smaller companies to start developing this culture of taking on an apprentice, training them well. The other thing, when I say well, I mean quality training. I think the risk we're running as a country is we're trying to charge ahead and push volume, and it's very risky because the risk you run, you've got youngsters being trained, going and sitting at home, and industry not absorbing them because they haven't been received quality training. The dual system model is fantastic. I mean, we've lived it for more than 20 years, my business partner and I. And we've seen so many kids. It's the most rewarding space to be in. You have no idea. We go in there, you see these youngsters come through your gates, timid. 3 months later, you're giving them like hard skills. They're walking around with their shoulders back, chin up. It is exceptionally rewarding to observe it. And then when they go back into the workplace and practice what they've learned in our institution, come back the following year, you have no idea how their lives are being changed. And a lot of those kids come out of very poor, impoverished backgrounds. Within 3.5 years when they qualify, you're projecting them straight into middle class earnings. If you look at the contribution to the fiscus of an artisan over the duration of their career, it's north of 5 million. You take 5 million rand, extrapolate that over 20,000 artisans, you're talking about a significant contribution to the economy. So quality, getting pride in the trades, making it a first choice for youngsters instead of a second choice when they don't get into university. And also introducing some innovation. There's an amazing opportunity with AI to support the development of artisans. Another problem we have to overcome is poor basic education. We're having a lot of kids not adopting or getting involved in STEM-related subjects. So when they arrive at ATR, we have an incredibly difficult job helping to fast-track the learning and the skills required and from a theoretical point of view, just to cope with the theoretical content. So we are using AI. We've put all our content into an AI platform. We've got video-based content for every single module across 16 different trades. And we're going to use that strategically to help. And I think from a pedagogy point of view, teaching young people to use AI from the get-go, teaching them to be very precise in the way they prompt it, also enables them later on to give very precise feedback to their bosses when they get questioned. So I'm super excited about that. I think that combined with working with quality employers, we train all AFGRI's, APPIs, Komatsu, Glencore, and the real magic happens when you've got quality employers that take their apprenticeship programs very seriously, because not only do we apply rigor at an institutional level, but when that APPI is deployed in the workplace, they in very, very controlled, structured learning environments, which makes a massive difference to their journey. I always say that the on-the-job component is probably more important than what we do when it's done well. So a well-structured program, and it's an area where I know it's not easy for smaller employers. There's a lot of red tape to taking on apprentices, but boy, is it rewarding. And far more rewarding when you can groom somebody in your own company culture, work them through the system, and if you treat the APPIs well, 9 times out of 10, they will stay with you. I always hear this argument by employers saying, oh, you train an APPI and the minute they qualify, they leave. It's only because of the way you treat them and the way your reward structures work. So it's something we should all be doing, in my opinion.
Finally, I've made my way to the other female in the room. I said earlier, we're bookending these gentlemen, and it's proper that we do so. Dr. Moetse, from an inclusion perspective, what's still missing from many of the current agricultural skills initiatives? Because as Mr. Petler pointed out, we have many training institutions already in place. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We need to work with what we've got and get everyone on the same page. So having identified what those gaps are, share them with us.
Yeah. No, thank you for the question and the opportunity. Look, I think that there's a way of approaching this that requires us to learn from ourselves continually. There has been opportunities where we have seen that if we collaborate better, I think as South Africans, we talk a lot about collaboration. And I personally believe that with skills, that is the most important areas where collaboration cannot just be in words, but it must be in practice. No one company can do it alone, or one ecosystem person can do it alone. We need the whole ecosystem, whether it's ecosystem actors, ecosystem components, or ecosystem enablers. Everything must come in to support basically a system-based approach to our skills development and not training. Skills are more than just training. I think the previous speaker sitting here, I think, said a mouthful about how we have trained people, but they got out there and they can't do the work that they've been trained for. So I think we are in a right space, I think, that we are thinking about skills. And let me tell you why for Kagiso Trust it matters. You know, with the level of unemployment of young people out there, I think we're sitting, everybody's saying we're sitting on a time bomb. It's real. And I think as a nation, we need to be thinking deeply about how do we cut down that number. And it has to be very inclusive. We have experience working with rural learners. I was saying to my colleagues here, that's why I gave away my high heels. because you have to walk, and there's so much talent out there. We don't need to make our lives convenient by working with those that are closer to us, because it's not sustainable. Actually, now that I think about it, farms are not even where we are with our high heels. And therefore, it's quite important that we have to think inclusiveness. At the beginning, it could be uncomfortable, but over time, I think as a country and as we work as an ecosystem, I mean, we believe in Kagiso Trust. We have the heart. Our vision is to say peaceful, prosperous, and just. The reality is, unless there are economic opportunities for the young people, this peace, the vrede in Afrikaans, that's what we call it, vrede. It can't be achieved. It's very, very artificial. But I'm comforted, and we are comforted that we are seeing the ecosystem beginning to say, let's go beyond talking. Let's now put it into practice.
Look, and technically we don't really have an excuse. I mean, I know there's different forms and different levels of access to digital and online learning and interconnectivity in rural areas. I get that. But show me one young person, regardless of where they're from, who doesn't have a phone and will make a plan to reach out, connect with the information where it is. So absolutely agreed there. Plus high heels are far too overrated. Valleys for everyone. Tobias, I want to ask you, before coming back to you, Minister, actually, I've forgotten my question. I'm talking about high heels. I'm going to remember it. It was important.
May I make one or two comments?
I've got it.
Okay.
I've remembered it. I wanted to, and you can always throw your points in later, but I wanted to connect it to this morning's first session here at Nation in Conversation, which was about the economic realities of farming today. To farm or not to farm. If you could choose to farm, would you? Does it still make viable economic sense? And that's a very pertinent question to this discussion as well, because we can't talk about agriculture having the huge potential to expand, to create new jobs, to absorb people through technology, if farmers are at risk and if businesses do not have the capacity to absorb learners for these apprenticeships, and if on-farm training is not a part of this whole model. From this morning's discussion and from Grain SA's knowledge of the pressures on farmers at the moment, is that just a temporary glitch? And does that resolve itself over time, and that's something we don't have to worry about?
Well, that's a whole big separate discussion, but I think that what it fundamentally comes down to, especially in agriculture, there are seasons and there are cycles. and we're on a particularly tough cycle. And now, on top of that, we've got the fuel price and the price of fertilizers just getting out of hand. So that makes people lose courage. But when you walk around here at the outside, you see people thinking about the future, investing. Yes, circumstances might be tough, but you can see the resilience. Not allowed to say that word with that fuel price, but you can see farmers are still investing in the future. Farmers are still investigating all of the technology. All technology costs money, and they are thinking, how do we survive not only for next week but also next year and the next decade? So these investments are continuous, and this is very much a part of that. Agriculture, people need to eat. We're going to be competitive. I mean, this is the conversations that we have with the Minister all the time. How do we establish agriculture as a sector that's economically competitive, internationally, attracting dollars and money from overseas, exporting stuff, employing people, growing rural economies? And this is fundamentally what this is about. How do we employ people? Yes, different conversation, but we're going to make this work. So, and to continue for it to continue working, and this is now coming back. Why I'm particularly encouraged by Kagiso's approach, and why we originally spoke about it, it's about science and technology. And there are kids in rural areas that are interested in science and technology. Where this opportunity really comes from is, why do we want to have a Nampotech? I think Sean pointed out nicely, the world of technical training, artisanal training has changed. It used to be the Escoms and the Transnets of the world. Now everybody needs to do their own thing, and that's the one big gap that we have to fill here. But the other gap that we need to fill is, how do you convince that student or that employee on the longer run to stay at home? And this is why we want to do something from agriculture, because if you get somebody from the city and try to get them into the town, that's not going to work. They miss the lights too much. We even struggle to keep some of the kids home. So get somebody that's already got a love for agriculture, a love for rural area understanding, and upskill equipment and give them the right things to create the future for themselves. I think one very important thing that I want to add there is, this is very much supplementary. This is a gap specifically in agricultural training. Mfane, we need to look at the agricultural colleges. Minister, I should look this way as well. How do we solve that problem? There's lots of work that needs to be done, but that's a different kind of qualification. Nobody is doing artisanal training for agriculture. The agri-colleges are there, all the private guys are emerging, and that's why we said from Grain SA side, okay, the gap that we are seeing where nobody is shaping is in artisan training. And like I said, there's such a big demand, it's nearly like guaranteed jobs, and isn't that a lovely initiative to be involved in?
Minister, what makes you excited the most about this Nampotech initiative? The kind of cooperation you see, the people around the table, and progress that we're making in better policy to support the outcomes at the end of the day.
Well, look, I think we've got a long way to go with the policy, and I'll talk a little about the agricultural colleges when I make some remarks after this point that I want to make. And that is that what makes me excited is that I can see a shift taking place in the world that is going to lead to Africa and South Africa transforming into the food supplier to the world. I can tell you from experience of being overseas in Europe, the subsidy system is creaking. In the UK, since the exit from Europe, it's not economically viable to pay people not to farm or to heavily subsidize them. And I think we're starting to reach and head towards a tipping point where those countries are going to realize that it's actually cheaper to source food for their countries from African countries who've got the manpower, who've got the soils, who've got the land, and who can do it far cheaper. And it'll be to the benefit of the consumers as well in large parts of Europe and the world. China is having to make key decisions now. Do we set aside acres for macadamias, or are we building fintech factories there? And they're starting to make those trade-offs and looking to other countries, which is, I think, largely behind their zero tariff approach now, to provide the food to feed their population. So there's huge opportunity for Africa and South Africa to position itself as the supplier of food to the world. And I think we have to then make sure that we've harnessed the skills there to do that. The agricultural colleges are in the process of a major redesign, and I've had 2 meetings now with Minister Manamela. Constitutionally, they belong with higher education. And if we're actually serious about attracting young people to study agriculture, we have to give them the same opportunities we're giving to people at formal universities. Why can a formal university student apply to NSFAS for student funding, but someone attending an agricultural college can't? And so if we want to bring that parity that Doctor mentioned around bringing your sort of formal traditional education, university education, up to par, or bringing them together so there's parity, you've got to provide the same opportunity for those students that are making that choice. There's some students who maybe want to do agriculture but are forced into a university system because their parents can't fund fees, etc. And then I think we've got to look at curriculum, and this is one of the discussions that we're having now, is that do we have one national agricultural college with set curriculum and have satellite campuses, or do we have agricultural colleges that begin to specialize in, so there's a standardized curriculum, but if you want to specialize in a particular form of agriculture or the like, to go there. But if I look at the current curriculum, we're preparing people for agricultural colleges, with the greatest respect for what has been and what is now. I don't believe that the curriculum is looking into the future, and that's something that we're going to have to address now as we reimagine agricultural colleges over the next year, as we transition to moving them away from provinces and trying to align them with universities or with industry, so that you start to get those synergies taking place, so that the skills that we're imparting at agri colleges are then teaching those people. But then you've got to give those people the opportunity. And this is why I get frustrated when I see us giving tracts of land and farms to people who have never farmed, who have no clue what it is. And farming is not putting something in the ground and hoping it'll grow. It's science, it's economics, it's technology. And as we've seen, the skill sets that are now required to progress farming are hugely changed. Having seen innovations now where they're growing microgreens in warehouses with 4 employees who actually manage AI robots that are producing intensive microgreens. So the agricultural world is moving forward, and we have an opportunity here in South Africa to leapfrog into that tech, much like we did with our cell phone infrastructure. Because we were late to the game with cell phones, we were able to leapfrog even countries like the US that had adopted older technology. We now need to use this opportunity to leapfrog so that we can position ourselves for that moment when the world turns to Africa and says, actually, it makes more sense for us to obtain food security and uptake from your continent than it is for us to be running a creaky subsidy system that doesn't work for consumers and doesn't work for governments.
Dr. Jones, coming to you, because you've been talking about it from the education perspective, but putting ourselves in the shoes of employers, what do they most underestimate about their own role in successful skills development?
It depends largely on the size and the sophistication of the employer. The smaller employers generally negate their responsibility to train and take people in. And I understand it. It's difficult. As I said earlier, the red tape is something that they always say is an issue. The larger employers quality customers tend to train more than what they need. So they'll take on 15 to 20% more apprentices, train them, they keep the cream of the crop, and post-qualification cut the rest loose to look to job seek. I think from an employer point of view, there are more pros and cons. Typically, at an institutional level, we train all the basics of a trade so that when a young person leaves, they go and specialize within an original equipment manufacturer or within a plant in a mining environment or somewhere, and they gain their skills there. So, and by and large, employers add enormous value. And just talking earlier about, how do we maintain pace with the technology advances that are happening? most industry does already. So when we train the basics, most of our OEMs that we train for, they all have their own training environments as well, where they specialize youngsters in those areas. Universities and institutions like ours just cannot keep pace with technology. It's literally impossible, and that's why we've gone the AI route. You know, we can't afford to go and buy these fancy tractors with all these specialist technologies in them. Just impossible. So, but the OEMs do it. So they add enormous value. And when they're onboarded and we work in a productive ecosystem, the magic happens, especially quality. When we push quality, so many employers as well, when you talk to them, they're so cynical because there are a lot of people running around with Red Seal qualifications that literally are not ready to have that seal or bandied about. So there's a lot of cynicism out there. People talk, like, generalize about how the whole industry's collapsed and you cannot find a good artisan anywhere. It's simply not true. There are pockets of excellence. What we have to figure out is how we expand that quality and maintain it. And a lot of it, I think, comes back to we have to push quite hard to get alignment between NAM and QCTO. At the moment, they're doing this. There's a lot of pressure on them politically to get things sorted. I know that. But it is causing disruption. I think that's probably the greatest risk we face right now. What's happened in the plumbing trade, for example, this is the risk. If we bungle our education system, the risk we run in the long term is that employers opt out and start doing their own thing. We have to create a system that works, that is effective, devoid of unnecessary red tape, so that employers can be won over and continue to support skills development, especially the medium-sized and smaller guys. We have to get them on board to help.
That speaks to on-farm needs, which is where organisations like Grain SA come really in handy. Dr. Moitse, I want to come to you to talk about funding. Education is hugely reliant on funding, but how does catalytic funding help de-risk innovation and strengthen long-time skills to jobs pathways?
You know, with funding, it's a very interesting phenomenon in our country. I think most of our funding structures do not reflect the country we live in. Honestly, you look at how the very farmers, when they talk about, even when they approach government funding, whether we were speaking earlier about the bank, private funding, it's really not reflective of what needs to be required on the ground. We have found that, therefore, it requires, hopefully over time, that will change. I mean, once we realize that we are depleting our country of a competitive advantage that we've been talking about, once we realize that we are all at risk, hopefully we will re-look at what structures do we need to put in place. In the meantime, it's true, we will therefore need catalytic funding to de-risk, to say if one enters a deal, when developmental funding enters a deal, does it change? The only challenge that we have, which we still need to work on, is that when a de-risking partner comes in, the other partners should not remain the same. You know, there has to be a journey towards moving towards conversion, because even that catalytic funding, it will never be enough. Because what does catalytic funding do for us? It says, I'm patient, I can go to finance somebody who in the normal environment would never be funded. We can find that learner who would have never been given an opportunity and give them an opportunity and bring them in a space. So we really need catalytic funding that's growing and not what's repeated by ecosystem partner who prefers to stay exactly where they are and not supporting the system. So it's almost like we're spiting ourselves. So if we lose those who are bringing catalytic funding should not be taken for granted. Actually, they should be encouraged by seeing the other parties coming to the fore. So we really believe that's the way to go. There are partners, we have seen it in the ecosystem right now. There are partners who are moving along that direction. So hopefully in the next few years, we'll be talking a different language sitting here.
Mr. Petla, what signals from industry should most influence future skills planning and occupational development? How do we ensure that, like where we are now, we're not teaching for what was and what is now, but really critically assessing what we should teach for the future?
Look, even the model of training is, by nature of design, was designed in such a way that the industry leads, the critical skills for economy. And if you look how the qualifications are crafted, the industry dictate the content and the direction of what competencies need to build into the learning pathways. So in the same length or breadth, surely there must be symbiosis between the training agencies, training providers and colleges and university with the industry. That relationship is so important because it's a connector between the two worlds. At the moment, we are not doing well. The colleges are entrepreneurs and they look after the business and the private sector and so on. And also the employers and the industry are also looking at the bottom line issues to say, the skill that I need is just close to my heart is the skill that will be able to make productivity goals for me, and that is my survival lines. So if the culture now try to move together, and you see the agencies of training also work with the same concept with what the industry is seeking to address, that talked economy. I think it is the time that we can say today, there is also a relationship that is coming together between the implementers of learning and the generators of the qualifications. Because as we stand, I think we are training people for employment, and that is the success we are looking to, but I think we are looking success in wrong places. If we are saying South Africa need to produce learners with the CVs to go and look for job, I don't think we're gonna win. For me, the shift is important to say, can we produce learners that are entrepreneurial in terms of their culture, in terms of being able to go and do business on their own and be self-sufficient in doing the training? Because the time bombs that Doc is mentioning, we need to find a way to detonate those bombs safely, because they are coming in numbers now that learners are being trained and recycling in training, because there's no exit. So they keep themselves in a loop of training, and we keep on funding this mechanism that is now emerging in our life. So we need to find exit strategy for them, where the sector, the industry, and the training institution come together and map out how to exit these learners and start making a business sense and start participating in mainstream economies. So I think that is the time that we can say the industry's influence now can be measured and the impact can be measured. But as we sit, we've got myriads and myriads and records that we can show you the learners that went through learning, but when you trace them, they are in another sector, start to learn something. If they exhaust all the avenue, they fly to another sector. So when are they going to start participating in economy? Now they define economy in the learning spiral. So we need to really undo that process and get the stakeholders together, the private sector, the industry, and the institution, to start mapping up the exit strategies for the learners, so that when we put money into it, we know that they're going to be absorbed by their own little businesses, cooperatives, and so on. We can learn from African states, some of them, with zero resources. But they do cooperative models, they put together things, they club together, and they send to the markets. So in the same breath, we can start something, the culture like that, so that people can be self-sufficient and start producing and sending. Not to go with the CVs and start working, looking for job, because the size of economy dictates how many they can absorb. At the moment, we're not having luxury of getting every learner that exited training into the employment. So something need to be done there to try look at exit strategies for the learners.
We've got 10 minutes left. I want to give an opportunity for questions from the floor. If anyone wants to raise their hand, if anyone has a question, we've got a question down here. There is a microphone for you.
So it's not a question, it's just an input to the discussion. If I ask a question, I'll get myself into trouble for various reasons. So I think if we look at training and development, there's just 3 elements I want to bring. Our farmers are saying training is not accessible enough. Remember, they're in rural areas. They cannot travel to Port Pretoria to come and do training. It escalates the costs. And that's why I love what Dr. Doi and his team is doing. It's about getting access to training. The second one is, it is not about money in South Africa. We're the second biggest spender on training and development in the world. Unfortunately, we are number 55 in terms of performance, in turning that into impact, which means we are doing something. Now, I bring that all under trust. Now, trust means that our employer's voice should be louder when we plan training. This is why I love what is being done here. Because remember, if the voice of the employer is loud, it gives you agility, you can adjust. One of the biggest weaknesses that we have as a country is we're not agile enough. We don't change quickly enough. It takes us 3 years to develop a qualification. Doc, you will shake your head and say, yeah, it's true. So I would bring it down to access, trust, and then I would say if we can just get our industry to start believing in us again, that we are really developing a product that can be useful for them. All the other things will fall in place. Something to consider, Doc, is remember we also need to look at our current employer base. The young ones come in with technology and they're sharp and their hairs are standing like, we all understand that. But some of our employees, they've still got 15 and 20 years to work. We also need to look at how we are on board them in terms of technology. Let me stop now and perhaps give somebody else a opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that input. Anyone else would like to contribute something? We've got something in the back there.
Thank you, Anli. Mr. Patla, you mentioned relationships very briefly, and I'd like to perhaps elaborate a little bit on that and address my question to you. From where you sit, how would you say could industry stakeholders and AgriSeta work together even better to ensure the continuity of development programs, to ensure that the successful initiatives maintain their momentum and achieve the lasting impact across the agriculture sector?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have structures. We do have subsector committees which talk to our economic sectors in the sector. And those are very, very critical structures that inform our skills planning, that inform our regime in terms of where we want to go, the strategy that the board would like to pass and adopt as our direction or vehicle to carry out. So I think we need to just broaden it a little bit to look at from the basis of being the structures that we're working with, but what are the very key issues that we can strengthen our relationship with them to talk more better, broaden the scope of implementation, broaden the scope of research into that, and see how we work together, individual sectors that we are working with. We've got 11 of them that I think they are very key in the space of agriculture at the moment. So I think we will just have to increase how we relate to them in specific areas that talk to economy, not just nice to have a merit certificate on the wall, but at least something that talk to implementational kind of actions into it. But I think it's a good question that we may maybe elaborate a little bit further with individual sector of how do we take our relationship further.
Last question in the front, and then I think we need to wrap up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I seem to be one of the unicorns in the room. Small employer, farmer, and we have an apprentice program in our tractor business. And we also run a dairy farm where we have people who also try to get people. One of the biggest problems we actually have is to get people into agriculture, because there's still a big stigma about working in agriculture. We train quite a few tractor technicians a year, and our biggest threat is we lose our guys overseas. We've got a guy fully qualified. The world is his oyster. There's such a demand for these guys worldwide and in South Africa.
Yeah.
But we go to schools, we try and matrics and the rural schools, we try and get them to come in to apply for tractor apprentices or whatever, and we just don't get them. And on the other side, I don't know how it is, but at one stage we actually threatened that we'd actually lose our training grant because we're not BEE compliant. And that, or we asked them to put it in writing, it never ever happened, but it was a threat that we actually received. And things like that. And another big problem that we actually have, and more on the farming side, is that we've trained many, many people on our farm. And you have a person coming in as a herder, and eventually 3 or 4 years later, he is able to get a heavy duty license, which is a key into a total different segment. And it's actually an honor to be able to train people and to see them to actually spread their wings and move away. When a guy actually leaves our training and he goes to greener pastures, it's something that we actually thrive on. But we need to get that expanded further. But a big problem that we have is that you often get people applying for a job and he's not suited in his position, and it's impossible to get rid of that people once he has an employment contract. So our labour laws in South Africa, with a minimum wage and the difficulty of actually being able to terminate a guy in position who's not suitable for the position, is a major, major problem. We were a practical situation. We were actually some learner people who come through some of the college were supposed to come for practical training. We accepted them. And the Monday morning, 4 people arrived, 3 young ladies in high heels with nails this long to work in a tractor workshop. It was not proper. We had to turn them away. So, I mean, there are practical issues that are happening that are preventing us from being able to develop our roles and to employ more people. And as a tractor distributor, one of the things that really bugs me, when somebody comes onto our stand, wants to buy a big tractor, and his reason for buying the tractor is to replace labour. Labour in South Africa is cheap. We have people, we have good people available. We need to give them the skills to make them employable, and we have to do everything in our power to do that, because that time bomb is real, and we're trying to diffuse it in a small way.
Thank you. I want to ask you, Minister Steenhuisen, because we had a session here at Nampo last year on infrastructure. Minister McPherson was an integral part of that. And we know that plays a big role in attracting young people to the sector and keeping them there and getting them skilled from rural areas, but then not to lose them to the cities or to overseas. Maybe ordinary South Africans don't see that progress in a very real practical way, because we have to deal with potholes, but are we making tangible progress with infrastructure to keep people in small rural towns?
Yes, but we're not doing enough, we're not doing it fast enough. What you don't want to see is a collapse of rural economies, because that then puts huge pressure on your urban environments that can't take it. And we've seen, there's been a massive urbanization in South Africa over the last 20 to 30 years. And that's why we have the pressure there of informal settlements and the like. Cities cannot take the pressure. So it's in the country's best interest to maintain rural communities as vibrant hubs of employment and opportunity, and for young people to see a future for themselves in those hubs. So one of the key successes, I think, of last year was the discussion around infrastructure that resulted in a partnership between the Department of Public Works, Agri SA, and the Free State to start on a project of looking at the economic road corridors that most impact on agriculture. I think they were here about a month ago to do the launch of the beginning of that particular project, and Minister McPherson's going to be up here over the next 2 to 3 days to no doubt unpack some of that.
Yeah.
But it also goes back to one key ingredient that we have an opportunity to fix, but I'm not sure whether we're acting with the urgency, and that is the state of local government in South Africa. It is key to keep small towns working, to have municipal infrastructure that is fit for purpose and working. And I'm not convinced that the current model of local government in South Africa is fit for purpose for the type of towns and cities that we want to see. We have an opportunity now with the new white paper on local government that's been published for comment to reconceive what local government looks like. Do we need to have so many municipalities? Could we look at consolidating to get efficiencies of scale? What is the tension between district municipalities and local municipalities when it comes to service delivery? And how do we resolve some of those? How do we get rid of that duplication of having district mayors and local mayors, etc., when you could be consolidating with a focus then on infrastructure? And I think that what's been very helpful now is the extension of Operation Vulindlela from the national level now into local government, where the private sector and public-private partnerships are being looked at for things like electricity substations, for things like sewage treatment works, for things like water treatment works. And then lastly, I'd make the point that I think we do need to see a system where there's far more synergy. To no use small municipality X spending a fortune on building a sewage treatment plant that's going to last another 10 to 15 years, municipality Y next door doing the same, when both should be looking together at perhaps building something on the municipal interface that's going to have a 50 to 100-year lifespan, and rather pooling those resources to get an asset that's going to go the distance, and then to obviously put the maintenance budget together for that. So I think we've got to reconceive how local government works if we're going to rescue rural South Africa, because that's really where the rubber hits the road, and that's really where we're seeing the huge pressure now on infrastructure failure. And I think lastly, I would say that the big step forward now is being made around from Minister Gondongwana and National Treasury on ring fencing. So no longer using electricity as a profit point and then spending the money elsewhere. A portion of that has to be remained to reinvestment in maintenance and infrastructure rollout of that particular service. So in the past we've seen things like water and electricity cross-subsidizing other parts of nice-to-haves that municipalities want to do.
Yeah.
I think the ring fencing model that Minister Gondongwana is pushing is the right way to go, because you're guaranteeing then maintenance and reinvestment into those key infrastructure, things like water, sewage and electricity.
Okay. We are running out of time, so I want to give the last question to you, Dr. Doyer, just because this is a Grain initiative, Grain SA initiative, and I want to ask you two things. We've heard agility a number of times. Agility in adapting how we train and what we train to keep up with technology. Also, adapting in different ways to the needs of businesses and their ability to absorb artisans. Where does agility and our failures in being agile enough, where does that lie? Because it's very easy to point fingers in one direction, and we see some people doing it in the media. But as someone in the industry, and I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here, but how do we unlock more agility?
Yeah. It's wonderful to point fingers, and it's so easy, isn't it? Especially when people are doing things. This is the second NAMPO that Minister Steenhuisen is attending as minister. And we've got millions of vaccines in South Africa, the first time in decades. And yes, we can fix things if we are focused. Agile, 2 years is obviously too slow, but man, we are getting things done. And I think this is, and I want to bring it back a little bit to NAMPO. Only the lekker thing about NAMPO, and why do we call it NAMPO Tech? Because as a sector, we're never going to be agile. We are big. Okay, but NAMPO is an example of how we can be agile. NAMPO fundamentally is about being agile about technology. Farmers come here to talk to the providers of the best and the most recent technology share that technology and adopt it back into the farms. And that's why we call it Nampo Tech. It's not Grain SA Tech, it's Nampo Tech, because what we have around here is an amazing model. So if anybody wants to do training, and it be a private training, there will always be questions, but Nampo is community owned. It's owned by the grain producers. If there's any profit or any surplus whatsoever, it goes right back into the community. One of the fun things now, if you start training, Sean would know, is either going to be the red tractors or the yellow tractors or the green tractors or the blue tractors, and if one does it, the others won't participate. And I think the same for, and this is where we're really appreciating the agribusinesses that have got the learnership positions, the artisans' positions. If the one does it, then the other ones won't do it, and they'll steal their appies. And what we are hoping and what we have proven on Nampo, what can we do? We can bring everybody together to one little piece of land here, red tractors, green tractors. We can bring businesses from the north and businesses from the south. And hopefully Richard is the patron saint of that organization. We keep everybody apart. There's no big fights going on. We all stay within our lines, and we partner to do something beautiful. Partner to really make and being agile and change the way that we do things. All the newest technology is always going to come back to Nampo. This is the place where all of the future learners and the past learners can come together, adopt new technologies, adopt new ideas, adapt it and apply it to South Africa. And that's really the vision why it is called Nampo Tech. And I'm so grateful for all of you to participate in this. And it's also a platform where government, industry, private, all can participate. And I think the one thing that we haven't mentioned is Sean is the training provider partner, and it's also a partnership. Nampo is not going to do it ourselves. That's the beauty about Nampo. We just have a piece of land. We try to organize it properly, but the real party happens because everybody is here and everybody is doing their thing, and that's why we enjoy Nampo. Thanks.
Can I make one final point? Because it ties in very perfectly with what I said and what Tu was saying. I think what we're seeing with the skills development that Nampo Tech creates and those types of skills, we would see a spillover to address the various problems about municipalities as well. Because their big problem, particularly in rural areas, is lack of skills and of the technical skills. And many of these things that they'll be training on are skills that municipalities need to ensure service delivery. Municipalities have tractors to cut grass. Municipalities have plumbers and technicians to manage electricity and water. So I would hope that there would also be a spillover from these programs into these government areas to help us address that skills gap at municipal level and help make sure we deal with the infrastructure crisis that we have.
Absolutely. Thank you once again to all of you for attending, to all our panelists. Skills development cannot happen in isolation from the realities of work, technology, and economic growth. And Nampo Tech represents an important example of what becomes possible when industry, government, and institutions co-create solutions with employment as the end goal. Thank you so much.
Well done.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
It was really interesting. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
My